Hello again everyone from Tokyo, Japan, and welcome back to Japan Vintage Camera. It's a very beautiful day here in Tokyo, very sunny and comfortable and clean and clear. We're lucky in Tokyo that though it is a kind of large and major city, we rarely suffer from air pollution problems here. Most days this time of year are quite pleasant, except for those days when we get wind and rain, which kind of plague us a couple of times a week during the springtime. Yesterday was one of those days. I'd wanted to come out and make a video and do a few other things during the day yesterday, but the weather wouldn't allow it. But luckily today is quite nice and beautiful and a great day to come out and make a video. The subject of today's video is an interesting and unique camera. I use the words interesting and unique to describe a lot of the cameras I do reviews about, but these words are especially true for this particular camera. This camera is the Automat, or Mamiyaflex Automat A, which was introduced in Japan in 1949. For those of you who are new to my channel, I sell vintage Japanese cameras in my online store, japanvintagecamera.com. And I also have an Etsy store, which is also called Japan Vintage Camera. So if you're interested in purchasing this camera or another vintage Japanese camera, please visit one of my stores, or both of my stores. I'll post links to my stores in the description below the video. So as I said, the Mamiyaflex A was introduced in 1949, and it was produced until about 1956 or so. And there were quite a few different variations produced over that time. As close as I can figure by the Japanese literature on these cameras, this one was made in about 1954 or so. Each year having a number of different features or things like that. Things like either a self-timer, which this one doesn't have, but which the 1955 and 56 cameras did have. And it also has a locking lever for the shutter button, which wasn't available on the earlier cameras. But I can't be exactly sure this is a 1954 model. I'd say I'm about 70% sure, which is probably about as close as I'm going to get. Maybe there are a few Mamiya gurus out there who know exactly what year this camera is. If you do, please tell us in the comments section below. So, interesting thing about this camera, which sets it apart from the design of other ones, are these knobs here located on the bottom. And it gives the camera kind of a cool appearance, which you don't see in other TLR cameras. These knobs happen to be the controls for the shutter and aperture systems. And on some cameras they are located on dials on either side of the lens. In other cameras like the Rolleiflex, they're located kind of in the middle. I kind of like this design here. It was actually a pretty interesting design. It was designed so you could operate the levers, or I guess knobs, from the bottom while holding the camera with your forefingers. And on either side here, there's a small short metal pin. And if you look down from the top of the camera, as though you're looking into the focusing hood, and you look a little bit more forward, all you have to do is turn these dials until the appropriate number lines up with the pin. So I could say my shutter speed to 1/250th of a second and set my aperture to f8, and I can see it quite easily like so. A very good design, very ergonomic, and I think that's the first time I've used the word ergonomic in a video, and very effective. It's a great design. Let's go ahead and take a look at the other features, functions, and controls of the Mamiya A Automat camera. The first thing I want to talk about is the lenses, or maybe the second thing I want to talk about after the knobs. This camera used the Olympus Zuiko 7.5 centimeter f3.5 lens, which is optically a very good performer, but unfortunately these cameras don't endure well over time. They suffer from chronic haze problems, and this haze is generally permanent. Most of these cameras, pretty much every single Mamiyaflex A I have ever come across has haze lenses to some extent or another. This particular one has very little haze compared to most of the other ones which I've seen. And this camera, the lenses are clean enough to use, but that is kind of the really big weakness that you will find if you are looking for one of these cameras, is the haze in the lens. And unfortunately, it cannot be cleaned. The haze kind of moves toward the inside of the glass, and there's no way to polish it off without damaging or ruining the lens. This one here had remarkably little haze. I was able to get most of it out in the taking lens to the point where this camera will take good photos. I was able to get some of it out in the viewing lens, but not as much as I would like. But looking through the top, it's still quite clear and more than good enough to use. I'm kind of debating with this camera whether to leave these lenses in here. I have a couple of old Mamiyaflex Bs which feature the Setagaya Koki lens, which does not have haze problems and which happens to be the same focal length and which wouldn't be very difficult to adapt in to the earlier A model. For collectors, that's kind of sacrilege because you want to keep it as original as possible, and for this particular camera I have the original lens cap, which is kind of unheard of, and I even have the original leather case. And the leather case in these cameras, after more than 70 years, they usually don't survive very well. But yeah, it's a really tough call. I suppose I could put in the Setagaya Koki lenses and keep these on the side or something in case a collector is interested, but I'll have to decide. The Setagaya Koki is a kind of funny name. Setagaya is an area located here in Tokyo, I would guess maybe to the southeast of the Shibuya area. It's kind of a difficult word, Setagaya Koki, for many people to say, so in later years it was changed to a shorter word with an R at the end and called Sekur. So if you're looking at any of the more modern Mamiya cameras, they will always have what is called a Mamiya Sekur lens instead of the Mamiya Setagaya Koki, which would kind of take up all the space around the lens. The lenses are the sticking issue in what is otherwise an amazing camera. Let's go ahead and move over to the other side here. And on the top here we have the film winding and shutter charging lever. And on the inside of this we have a selector dial which you can use. It's this one is a little bit stiff or hard to push, but you can push this around and use this as a reminder remind you what kind of film you have loaded inside of the camera. Down here we have the focusing knob, and this one here I believe is arranged in feet. And above this we have a depth of field indicator which shows how much depth of field you have at any given aperture. Here we have the shutter release button, and it's a wonderful feeling. A lot of SLR and rangefinder cameras do not have as nice a shutter release as the Mamiyaflex A. And on the bottom here with this little red knob is a locking switch which allows you to lock the shutter button to prevent you from accidentally firing it if you've wound the camera and decided not to take a photo. On the side here we have the knobs which you will pull out, and you pull these out in order to replace the film spool or take-up spool. And like the better quality TLR cameras, these lock upward. You pull them up and turn them a little bit and they lock in position to allow you to replace the film spool or take-up spools more easily, and then you just turn them until they fall back down on their own. Right here we have a socket for a PC sync flash cord or flash plug, so you can use a flash gun on this camera. This particular one doesn't have a shoe for mounting a flash. You would have to mount a flash using an accessory flash bracket. On the back here we have what passes for a light meter in the first half of the 20th century, and it is simply a written guide telling you what settings to use in particular situations. In these days, high-speed film was something like ASA 100, and this one here is showing this, I guess, this guide to be set up for using in the summer using high-speed film. And of course here we have an assortment of apertures and shutter speeds, and these are recommended for these situations on the back. For example, we have on the top for sports scenes, and then we have seashore and bright streets and landscapes. See with dark foreground and street scenes and group portraits and stuff like that. So you can kind of figure out what settings to use on the camera using this. And of course, modern film, we have a little bit more leeway when it comes to exposure. So you could probably get by if you don't have a lot of experience in photography by simply using this guide here. However, most of us are carrying smartphones nowadays, and you can get some really good light meter apps for your smartphone, and it allows you to take much more accurate exposures with one of these old cameras. On the bottom here we have the locking ring or latch ring, which allows you to open the film door, and in between we have a standard 1/4" tripod socket. To load the film, you would turn this counterclockwise and open the film door. And I haven't done much cleaning up on this camera yet, other than trying to get the lenses clean. We have the take-up spool here, and we have where you would put the film spool on the bottom. To load the film, you would pull out the knob here and turn it until it locks open. Drop in your film spool and turn this till it pops down inside. You might have to wiggle around the film a little bit to make sure the pin is holding it steady. Pull the paper backing up. I always bend a sharp crease in the backing paper so it fits better inside the take-up spool. And I will hold it down with my finger and pull up a little bit as I wind the film in order to make sure that the film backing seats inside the take-up spool. Very often in these cameras you'll turn this and the end of the paper backing will just slip out and the film won't advance as you are turning the dial. So I always push down on my finger and make sure that I keep doing that until I've got a good amount of paper here and I'm sure that it's working when I am winding the film. And I just wind it up until the arrows on the back of the camera are more or less in the center of the film chamber. So the arrows on the back of the film, backing paper on the film. Then close the film door and turn the dial until the red dot is in the closed position. And then you can simply wind the film and wait until the number 1 is lined up in the film counter dial and the camera should be ready to shoot. These cameras have a very nice focusing hood on the top, and a little bit better than some of the other cameras, it has a wider panel around the focusing loop here, and this prevents excess light from straying inside the camera and allows you to focus a little bit more clearly on the focusing screen. There is also a sports finder which wasn't quite perfected yet on these cameras, so I'm not going to demonstrate it now because if I go ahead and open the sports finder up, I'm probably going to spend about 5 minutes trying to get it closed. So to activate the sports finder, you would lift this up and you would push this window back in, and normally on these cameras to close the sports finder, you simply close the finder a little bit and that causes it to pop back upward in the appropriate position. Overall, these are a really cool and unique camera, and I've really been wanting one of these to shoot with and to go out and see how well it performs and how it works in, I guess, real life. So I'm going to debate for a few more days about replacing the lenses, or perhaps I'll go ahead and shoot a roll of film with this to see how well the original lenses are still working. We'll just have to wait and see. Anyway, that's it for my review of the Mamiyaflex A Automat camera from about 1954. As I said, I'm about 70% sure. I'll be posting more videos about other cameras in the near future. If you'd like to see these, please subscribe. If you like this video, please like it. That always helps. Once again, if you're interested in purchasing a vintage Japanese camera, please visit my stores by clicking one of the links below. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope you tune in again soon.